So I think it should be founders in the space who are very crypto native or have a deep understanding of crypto, but at the same time understand the end consumer very well. So, and who are outspoken and, aren't afraid of basically going against the grain. So examples of this would be Jesse Powell, founder of Kraken. I think it was like 2 years ago, there was a lot of, I can't remember what was happening with Kraken, but he really stood his ground when it came to that. Brian Armstrong, obviously, like also quite a staunch defender of like crypto values and kind of going against the American government when Gensler was giving Coinbase a hard time. From crypto founders, I would say Stani, founder of Aave, is a good example. I mean, Aave is the gold standard when it comes to lending. Lending is one of the most important things in a financial system, and Stani's been building like true to his word, true to his product since day one. He has like the perfect reputation. He's very, very likable, very knowledgeable on the subject, and I think he represents us very well. Hayden from Uni as well, I think would be Uniswap would be a good example of a founder who's both very crypto native, like understands the values of crypto, the values of crypto native folks, but also knows, what it takes to get the message over on Capitol Hill.
I think we need a variety of different people from different parts of the industry. There are a lot of different companies and that are very aligned with Ethereum today, for example. And I'll answer the question from an Ethereum perspective because that's where I sit. And what I want to make sure is, how do we know that Ethereum is protected? How do we know that the values of Ethereum? How do we know that the values of decentralization, of permissionless innovation, of censorship resistance, how do we know that those are going to be represented? And those are the things that are most important to me. And I think it's important to understand there are kind of like, there are lots of people that have those values and share parts of those values, but ultimately the best Ethereum representation is not going to come from, a public company that's aligned with Ethereum today. It's going to come from builders in the trenches, people that are building Ethereum protocols, whether that's on the infrastructure layer and on the application layer. So it's great to have, established companies, centralized exchanges in the mix as well, but I also want to make sure that the little guys, right? So the DeFi applications, the infrastructure builders, whether it's chains, whether it's RPCs, like all of these different players, even if they don't have the largest voice in Washington today, that they're invited to be at the table, because we need that perspective as well. And Ethereum is really about open innovation, which really brings all these different pieces to the table. And while different pieces and maybe aligned on different issues, you want to make sure that that core Ethereum voice is not left out of the conversation.
I think that the pivot from a council to summits was a conflict of interest, I guess, where if you have a few shareholders, naturally there could be, positions they hold that could be influencing. So the decision to move towards more, conferences and summits invites more people involved. I want to break it down into 4 categories. I'll start off with first RWAs, or tokenized treasuries. You have, Ondo, you have Tether, Circle, Athena, players who have built stablecoins and tokenized treasuries that can really speak to how do you mix US Treasury bills and crypto. Secondly, I would talk about infrastructure builders. That means L1s, L2s, people who have built the grassroots of smart contract languages and smart contract programming. That means Ethereum, Solana, Polkadot, Hedera, and potentially even Movement. Smart contract platforms that have really scaled and allow builders and developers to exist in crypto. Thirdly, I'll focus on, policymakers and lawyers. Look at the top venture funds like A16Z, Paradigm, Pawn. They all have their own general counsels as well as Polychain. And these are folks that can really provide insight from a nearly decade of investing for clear guidance into the United States. And lastly, I'll focus more on kind of policymakers in general that have backgrounds. So this is like senators, congresswomen, congressmen, even like politicians that are running up that have been very, very vocal for crypto. And I'm sure they should be involved in the board as well.
I think it's better to do a crypto summit because then you can have many different viewpoints involved in there instead of just having the old horses or like essentially the big names that are obviously going to have the resources to have people there and get into those conversations, because there's also going to be new and fresher voices that are coming up with new types of technologies or new viewpoints that also need to take into account. I think to me, it makes sense to have a lot of the major players that are already well established that are doing great things. So, you've got Ethereum, you've got each of the big layer 2s, Optimus, Arbitrum, us. Then you have some of the other ecosystems like Avalanche, Solana. All those actually make sense to be in there to get their viewpoints and be discussing with policymakers in general.
I would like to see, I'm very biased, I would like to see Aztec's General Counsel, Andre, represented. And this is not just because of my own bias, but he's been doing an enormous amount of policy work, along with another one of our lawyers, Omar. Advanced stuff people aren't talking about. Things like these central bank stablecoins in a privacy-preserving environment. Things like how to do private DeFi in a compliant way. How to regulate not just DeFi and non-custodial wallets, but ones that have privacy-preserving protections. And I think it's a voice and a perspective that is badly needed. That's my choice.